Bam. What's up, everybody? All right. I see we got one other person jumping in with us. We'll give a few minutes, few seconds, whatever it takes for everybody else to jump in with us. But we're excited for today's call. My name is Jeff Quiane, and I'm going to be hosting the call today in place of my man, John Kitchens, who is having a good time, I'm sure, and learning a lot at traffic and conversion this week. I see you as the first one on here, Frank. Welcome to today's Expert Mentors live call. We'll get started here in just a minute, but just give it a few more seconds or so to allow some other people to jump in with us. Well, it's just you and me too, Frank. If you can drop me a little chat maybe in the message box just to let me know that we are all good on audio and you can hear me. I appreciate it, Frank. So as we wait for a few more people to jump in here with us, I want to remind you, Frank, and anybody else who's jumping on here with us, that if you have not been to one of our expert advisor boot camps, that's really where we take the strategies and tactics that we talk about on these calls and take it to the next level. It's 3 days in person, jam-packed with training every day. And so the next one is coming up April 22nd to the 24th. It's here in Frisco, Texas. And it's a good time. The last one was February 11th to the 13th. We had about 70 agents in the room. And we've had a ton of great feedback. Some of them are already hitting the ground, taking new listings, using the listing presentation that we taught them at boot camp and that they've continued to improve. And you can see the schedule also here. It's 3 jam-packed days, like I say, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, going over everything from exponential growth to how to convert more buyers over the phone to killing it face-to-face, how to use your certified home buying advisor designation to build more authority. Everything from step 1 to 100 we go through during those 3 days at boot camp. Well, maybe we have everybody at traffic and conversion this week. Since there's not a lot of people, it looks like, on right now. But that being said, that's all right. I'm going to continue forward with what my plan was to go over today. And that was really how to break down and evaluate the quality of any lead source. And that's important to do so that you can determine which lead sources are working. Being able to do a side-by-side comparison on the key metrics, comparing one lead source to another, gives you the information so that you can make better choices on whether or not you would want to continue to spend money, for instance, with that lead source, or if you wanted to continue to invest the same amount in ad dollars as you were, or if by doing a side-by-side comparison, we can see that maybe increasing the ad dollars in a different lead source would be better. So for those reasons, it's really important to be able to drill down and understand the quality of any lead source. And so that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to walk through somebody's platform and take a look at exactly how I break down those numbers. And then I also have a worksheet that I'm going to share with everybody on this call, and it's already got the formulas built in. So you just have to put in some basic data and it will run it through its thing and give you some of those key metrics to make it easier on you. So I'm going to switch over here to this short, very simple. It's not meant to be the most beautiful thing in the world. It's just meant to keep it simple. And so before we get into the actual exercise, of pulling the data inside the platform and everything, which is what I'm going to do here in a second. We're going to talk about the principles first. So first off, whatever CRM or database you're using, in order to really drill down to the quality of any particular lead source, you want to make sure that you have your data segmented. So whether that's by groups, whether that's by adding a tag, whether that's by segmenting them by source, whatever method that your CRM allows for segmentation or categorization, you want to take advantage of. So that I've got my Zillow leads, for instance, in one group or as its own source or with a tag. And then I've got my Facebook leads tagged or in a group or assigned by that source, so that I can say, just show me Zillow leads, just show me Facebook leads. So make sure that your data is segmented. The second thing that I would suggest is that you customize the status or dispositions that are available in your system. So most of the CRMs that I've worked with, and I've worked with, 50, but most of them provide you the opportunity to customize those default statuses. So I would definitely, if I didn't have one, create a status for bad number, create a status for not interested, a status for nurture, a status for follow-up. I'd also create one for appointment set, appointment met. So if you have the ability to customize the statuses in your platform, be sure and do that, because then it allows us to get to the information a lot easier. If I wanted to see what the percentage of our leads are that we actually contact, but we lose, I could say, show me all the leads that are not interested, right? Or in that status. And it allows me a view just to that list so I can crank out some of those metrics. So make sure that you customize your statuses if you have the ability to. And then what a lot of people don't do is they don't spend the time to get familiar with the reporting capability of your system. Again, every CRM that I've worked with, most of them have at the bare minimum a simple suite of reports that you can run that will provide you a lot of important information. Some of the information that I'm going to go through and kind of extracting it from a manual standpoint, your system might provide you a report that would get you the same information. So explore the reporting capabilities of your system and make sure that there's not some report that you can query that would do some of the work for you. And understand what your key metrics are. That's going to be the underlying theme with what we talk about today. It's all about getting to these numbers. And when it comes to determining the quality of any particular lead source, what I'm really focused on is A, the contact rate, B, the conversion rate. And then the last two things would be the customer the cost to acquire an opportunity is really what I would call it. So cost to acquire an opportunity. And then cost to acquire a client, right? Or your customer acquisition cost, as it's commonly referred to. But notice the difference there. I want to know what the cost is for me to acquire an opportunity as well as a client. So a nurture, for instance, is somebody, based on the way that we train agents, a nurture is somebody who has motivation, who's identified a time frame to do something in 12 months or less, who has a willingness to meet, who's not engaged with another agent, who gives us good contact information and a time to follow up. Those are the 5 criteria basically that we would adhere to in order to call somebody a nurture. So that nurture is an opportunity, right? If we stay in touch with that person and we do a good job of building rapport and trust and credibility over time, positioning ourselves as the expert, we have a really good chance at turning that opportunity into a client. And so I want to know what the cost is to acquire that opportunity in my pipeline, in addition to ultimately what the cost is to acquire a client. So a lot of people don't look at the cost to acquire an opportunity, and that's one of the things that you're going to focus on if you apply the tactics that we're talking about today. And so when we get into the actual analysis and we go in to extract our data points that we're going to use, it starts with choosing the source we want to analyze. So some of you might be saying, you know, I'm running a new Facebook campaign and I'd really like to know how it's doing compared to other things. So Facebook would be the lead source that you're looking to analyze. Let's say that you just started at January 1st. And so the time frame that you might be looking to analyze within might be January 1st to February 1st. But first, start out with what's the lead source that I want to analyze and do an audit on, and what's the time frame in which, you know, I want to measure the quality. Sometimes you might not need a time frame. I just want to go all the way back. If I've been using Zillow for a year, then let me just see everything that's in my system over the past year. Or if you're evaluating a new lead source, for instance, you may want to say something like, show me all leads from new lead source created between November 1st and January 1st. And that gives me, you know, 60 days or so of data to analyze. And I would always take into account that 1 month's information is not indicative all the time of what the long-term picture is. And so I would suggest that if you can compile 90 days worth of data, then that really will probably give you a much more predictable picture of what to anticipate moving forward. Not to say that you're not measuring it in between those 90-day checkups from the neck up, so to speak, but 90 days is enough information for you to feel pretty confident in whatever the determination is that that data is indicating. So once we've identified the source we want to analyze and the time frame in which we want to analyze it, it starts with counting the total leads received. So that would be simply querying a view of all the leads of that particular source within that time frame in recording the total number of leads, whether that's 200 leads, 500, whatever it is. What I'm getting to is how many leads from that particular source have we received within a specific time frame. That's where it all starts. Once we've got the total leads, we're going to start to look at one of those key metrics, and that's the contact rate. And so in order to determine my contact rate, we need to understand what a contact is. And with all the different CRMs out there today, it may be called something different for you, but the principle is the same. And so let me ask you a question. If I was dialing leads, what would constitute me actually talking to somebody? What would constitute a contact? So if I called somebody and they said it's a bad number, would you consider that a contact? We would not. If I called somebody and they said they weren't interested, that would be a contact. If I called somebody and they wound up being a nurturer who met those 5 criteria, that would be a contact. If I called somebody and they said, not doing anything right now, but call me back in, 2 years, that would be a contact. You get the point here. Anytime that I actually make a direct connection with somebody, excluding a bad number, for instance, that would be a contact. So we would include not interested, nurture, follow-up, appointment set. All those would be considered a contact. Most importantly, I think to take notice of there is the not interested. Those are a contact. So they should be included when we're trying to determine our contact rate. So once we understand what exactly constitutes a contact, it's as simple as counting the contacts. So whatever the system is that you're using, what you would want to do is query a view that shows you all the leads that are in the status that would equal having to been contacted, like not interested, nurture, follow-up, appointment. Anything that's in one of those statuses tells me that that lead was contacted. And so with that, I can add up or take a look at the number of leads in that list that I've queried based on this, and I have then the number of contacts that were made. So at this point, we have the total number of leads that were generated, and now we would know how many of those leads were contacted, which gives us our contact rate. The next thing that I would look to do is determine what the conversions have been. And so we want to count the conversions in the same way as we count the contacts. we're going to query a view showing all leads that are in a status that would equal conversion. And so in your system, what does that mean? When you talk to somebody who is a lead generated online and next thing you know, you've got them in your pipeline, what's that status that you're moving them to? Maybe they came in as a lead that's classified as new, and then you speak to them and you move it to nurture or working, whatever that equivalent is to you that would equal a conversion. And so sometimes that might be client, it could be nurture, it could be follow-up, appointment set, appointment met. Those are all statuses or labels or whatever your system uses, whatever the vernacular is and whatever the copy is that they use, what the equivalent is of a conversion. And I want to query a list showing me everything that's in one of those statuses that would equal conversion and count the conversions. So now I've got the total number of leads that were generated from a particular source within a particular time frame. I've got the number of leads that were contacted out of that total. And I've got the number of leads now that were converted out of that total. And take notice that this would include, conversions would include nurture. It would include appointment set, right? So conversion in this case would not necessarily mean that it's somebody that I am working with right now. It doesn't have to be that it's an appointment set and I went on it and I took the listing. That's different. What we're talking about now, just from the standpoint of analyzing the lead quality, is how many of the total leads that we receive turn into something of a qualified opportunity, either a nurture or better, or whatever the equivalent is for you. The next thing that I think is really important in determining the quality of the data is to know what your burn rate is, so to speak, or how many of the leads that you receive have bad numbers. And so as you're going through a campaign, or if you're calling leads immediately as you receive them, like we do in our office with our ISA team who focuses on speed of response, you'll get that lead, you'll call it, and you'll find, this number has been disconnected, right? Or you get the person that answers and says, no, it's a bad number. By the way, sometimes they're probably lying. But usually in your system, there's a checkbox or a drop-down menu in which you can select bad number as the status for those leads. And so the same way that we've done opportunity, the same way that we did conversions, contact, right? The same way we queried a report to take a look at the leads that were in a status that equal to contact, the same way that we queried a report to look at the leads that were in a status that would equal conversion, we're going to do the same thing, and that's query a view showing all the leads in the status of bad number. So now I know how many of the leads I receive are bad numbers. That's an important number to know because I can watch for any fluctuations in it, and if it's above what I think is a benchmark industry standard, then there's a discussion likely that I might have with whoever is managing those ad campaigns. So at this point, you have the total number of leads that you received. You know what your contact rate is because you know the number of leads that are in a status that would have to have had equal to contact. You know the number of leads that converted into an opportunity based on being in a status that would have to have equaled a conversion. And you know the number of leads that were bad. All right. And so on that note, that's kind of the core. Now we're going to get into a few other data points besides bad number. It's going to go a couple steps further. But what I want to do now is switch over and really get into a platform and pull the numbers on a particular case so that we can really get an idea on what it looks like real world. And then, by the way, guys, I'm also going to share with you this spreadsheet. Let me see if I have it pulled up here. I was pretty well prepared. Here you go. So I'm going to be sharing this with you guys as well on today's call so that you can use this to do your own lead source audit and save you a lot of the time to calculate the numbers that we're going to be going through. The formulas are already built in here. So all you'll have to do is put info in the red boxes. Can't be any simpler than that, right? All you have to do is get at the information and put it in the red boxes, and that's how you're going to figure that out. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get into a platform real quick. I just need to give me 1 second. I need to pull up the domain for this platform that I am getting into. By the way, the example, the platform that I'm going to walk through this in is Market Maker, which is our sister CRM company. And so some of you might recognize it. And by the way, if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to drop a message in the chat box. All right. Okay. So now I got it pulled up. Let me go back here to share my screen. What's up, Robin? All right. So here we go. So this is our, favorite stepchild, or whatever you want to call it, Market Maker. I've used this thing for many, many, many years. And so I'm just going to walk through whether your system is Perfect Storm or it's Mojo or Follow Up Boss or whatever this conversion, whatever it is, the principles are going to be the same. So what I'm doing first here is I'm logging in and I'm getting to my leads. In this case, it's going to mean that I go right to my contacts tab. And so that's going to take me here, which is a list view of all the leads. Now, in this case, we're going to analyze Google source. All right. And we're going to say, let's take a look at Google source leads from January until now. Let's just say February 28th. And so right now I've put no statuses in as a filter or anything. I'm just saying, show me Google leads created between January 1st and February 28th. And so this is going to give me that total number of leads. If you remember, so we started with picking the source. We picked the time frame. The next thing was to get the total number of leads. So here we can see that we have 245 leads. So here I'm going to enter in my spreadsheet 245. That's how many total leads we got within that selected time frame. Now, does anybody remember the next thing? The next thing that we're looking for? We got the total leads. I'm sure somebody does. It's contact rate. And remember what statuses constitute a contact. So that would be, in this case, the way this system is set up, lost. That would mean that I called somebody. We've got some interest in your neighborhood. Do you know anybody thinking about making a move? Or, excuse me, this being an online lead. We received your information online. Were you only interested in that property, or were you interested in other properties within the area also? No, I'm not interested, man. Don't call me again. Right? That's a contact. It may not be the kind that I want, but that's a contact. So lost would be included. If I talked to somebody that turned into a nurture, that would count as a contact. If I talked to somebody and had set a follow-up, maybe they didn't qualify or I couldn't get enough information to determine if they were a nurture, so I'm going to follow up with them, that would be a contact. If I had set an appointment with somebody, obviously that would be a contact. So the principle there is, what are the labels, the way that your system is set up, that would equal somebody having been contacted? Once I've got that, you can see here our time frame is still in place, and we're asking it to show us Google leads between January 1st and February 28th that are in these statuses, which would equal contact. I'm going to hit submit search, and we are going to have how many? 50. 50. Doesn't sound great, does it? So number of leads contacted. We're going to put 50. Boom. So we can see, well, we haven't put all these numbers in yet. Hold on. Okay, so back. Now that we've got the number of leads that we contacted, let's also take a look at the number of leads that are still not contacted, right? And in this case, the way this system is set up, it would be no contact, not contacted, I mean, no answer, left message. These would all constitute leads that were still in the status of not contacted or had not been reached. In your case, maybe it's new, maybe it comes in as lead by default. So whatever it is, again, in your case, that would indicate that a lead has not actually been contacted, you would use whatever those labels are to query this view so we can get the number of leads that are still not contacted. We know we had 245 leads that were generated within the time frame, and we can see here that there's 118 that are still left uncontacted. And that's actually where I'm supposed to put that number here. 118 not contacted. And how many were contacted? 50. 50 were contacted. There we go. So we can see our contact rate here is 20%. So right off the bat, I'm getting some insight here to what's going on. So our contact rate's 20%. 48% of our leads are still not contacted. Maybe I could implement a Shake the Trees campaign, trigger a sequence that would send an email, a voicemail, drop a text message to see if I can get some engagement from that 48%, right? In our case, I can tell you that this account has a lot of calling being done. And so every one of these leads that has not been contacted, unless they came in within the last 2 weeks, they've all had at least 6 phone calls and a total of 10 to 15 touches, depending on how much contact information was available. But definitely at least 6 phone calls. And if there was an email, they received some emails as well. So this 48.16% is not in this particular person's account because nobody's been reaching out to them. So those are people that are, a little harder to get a hold of based on the information that we can look at. So we know what our contacted number is, our not contacted number was, our total leads. Now the next thing is, let's take a look at conversion. So how many leads ended up converting into something? So we have nurture, we have appointment set. Let's see, we would have, in this system, I think that is probably going to be it. Sometimes you might consider follow-up a conversion. So the way that I use follow-up is I want predictability. And so I mentioned earlier the criteria that we adhere to for a nurture is that there has to be solid motivation. There has to be a time frame to want to do something within 12 months or less. They need to not be working with an agent and be willing to meet whenever that time comes. We need to have good, solid contact information from them. And there needs to be a time set to follow up. The key thing for me is that 12 months, right? They're all important. But the 12 months really gives me some predictability if I adhere to that. So anything that is tagged as a nurture in a system that I manage, I would know that they would have had to tell that person they were wanted, the agent, whoever was talking to that customer, they would have had to tell them they were wanting to do something within the next 12 months in order to be in that status. So I can focus on the next opportunity that way. Follow-up, I would use if somebody was farther out than that year, or I wasn't able to get enough information to determine if they qualified as a nurture, or if maybe I just felt fishy about it and I wanted to make another call down the road to see if everything still added up, I would put those people in follow-up because I wouldn't want to mislead myself by pulling up all the nurtures in my database and thinking I have more than I really have, which could happen if I'm just putting stuff not based on criteria in that category of nurture, then the ability to use it as a crystal ball, so to speak, goes out the window. But in this case, let's consider nurture, appointment set, follow-up are all opportunities in our pipeline. We made contact, we had a conversation, there's reason to believe that there's some sort of opportunity there. So in this case, we've got 15 that have been converted into opportunity. So we will go here to this box, enter number of lead conversions. We've got 15. What are we missing? Bad number. Let's see how many of this 245 lead, how many of these 245 leads were bad number? And my guess is probably around 50 or so. I would say that when I look at most, there you go, how about that? When I look at most accounts, it's not surprising to see around 20, 25%. I mean, I pretty much expect that out of the gate. Now, the importance of doing this is, what if that number was 42%? Well, I got a problem. I would tell you, you have a problem. Well, let's get that lead provider on the phone and figure out why that's the case, because that is above what I would expect, right? But if we're not doing this kind of audit, we don't know. So we've got 59 of the leads that were a bad number. Let's see what that means. That means 24%. I told you about 20, 25%, I would say is kind of, you know, on average what I would expect. Anything above, you know, 30% especially, I'm asking some questions. We can see here that that's 24% of the leads that we received were a bad number. Now remember, you're paying for each one of those leads, whether they're a good number or a bad number. So it is important to take a look at it from all these aspects. Okay, so we've got our bad number. Now let's see, the next thing that we want to get is the number of leads with no telephone number, right? And so a lot of the times you'll have people that hit a lead magnet or a landing page, and you might capture their email address or some limited amount of information, but you might not capture their phone number. And so that can be a little bit tricky because there's no status usually in your system for leads that don't have a number. And so the way that I would figure that out is I'm just going to query the view that shows me all the leads of this source and in that time frame, which should give us the 245, right? And then you notice here how this column is missing a phone number. If I hit this little arrow, and any system that I've been in pretty much works the same way with the headers and being able to sort the list from top down. So when I hit that red arrow, you see now it's sorted it from the top down, starting with those that have a telephone number. If I click it again, what's it going to do? It's going to sort it from the top down, starting with those that have a blank field where the telephone number goes. And so if I have it sorted that way, and I'm going to tell the system to show me 100 leads per page, just so I can get a better view. And I can see, okay, so it's not 100, because before I even get to the end of my scroll there, I can see that there's numbers that start to pop up. So let's just take this list view of 20 and see if it extends that page. It does. So there's 20 without a telephone number. And let's see what's on the next page. There we go. So there's 20, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 26 of those 245 leads didn't have a telephone number. Pretty interesting to know, right? Pretty interesting to know that 10%, 10.61% of the leads that we're generating don't have a telephone number. I need to incorporate that, right? If I'm trying to predict what my return might be, if I'm trying to predict, well, out of these leads, how many opportunities can we get? Well, if I know that 10% of those leads aren't even going to have phone numbers and 24% of those leads are going to be bad numbers, now I can get to the real number that I'm working with and get much more accurate with my forecast. Okay, we're almost done here. So the last couple things here, start with number of leads not interested. Why are we doing that? Because not only is it important to know what the number of leads are that we're converting, you know, what our conversion rate is, but it's also important to know how many of the leads are we actually contacting that tell us that they're not interested. And with that information, we can start to hone in on the skill sets that the person who's calling, right, is working with. Maybe there's something that we can do to improve their script. If we notice that the percentage is higher than what we'd expect to be the norm, you know, we can have that discussion. If we notice that our contact rate in resulting in not interested customers, if we're talking to a lot of people but everybody's not interested, and that number is far more than versus a different lead source, then we might be able to conclude that while the information is good, these people are not by any means at the decision stage, or maybe even the consideration stage, or, you know, they just don't, they're not prospects. And so if I see that 50% of the people that we talk to, you know, are not interested, or whatever that number is, I have that information to start asking those questions. So in this case, we've got 35 that were marked lost, which the way that this system is set up would mean they told us that they weren't interested, take a hike, whatever, and some other things that are probably not so nice. So what are we looking at? 14% of our leads have been contacted and resulted in not being interested. Now remember, that's off the total number of leads, right? The reality is we only contacted 50 of these leads, so 15 out of 50, that would be, you know, a little bit different. What'd that be? 30%. So 30% of the contacts that we actually made told us that they weren't interested. Just digging deeper. Once you get these numbers, you can start to dig deeper, and you can go deeper than what we're doing today. And then number of appointments set. Let's see what we've got there. My guess is that Tom probably doesn't have anything in appointments set. And he doesn't. And I know that there's not going to be anything in that lead source under clients 1 yet. And by the way, it's important that whoever's part of your team, if it's just you, or if you got 50 agents on your team, it's important that everybody records their information and updates these statuses when they engage with customers. It's not uncommon that I'll be working with an agent who either they or their team is not going into the CRM and making those changes. And so if we're not doing that, then none of this works. If I'm not going in and changing the status to client when I actually get paperwork signed, then me trying to figure out the number of clients that we won is impossible, because nobody's changing that status, right? So make sure that you're changing the statuses. And if we did have that, let's just say that we had 2 appointments and we had 1 client that we got. So this is the calculator that I'm going to provide you, and you see how I got that information. So what that information is now going to tell us is our cold rate. So out of this Google source from January, January? Yeah, from January 1st to February 28th, we generated 245 leads, 118 are still not contacted. So 48% of the leads are still not contacted. Let's figure out a way to start getting more engagement from that 48%. I've got 20% contact rate, which is good. I think a 20% contact rate is great, to be honest. I don't know why that was there. Yeah, so I would expect, especially on an inbound lead source, I would expect to see no less than 18 or 20%. I'd really like to see closer to 35%. That would tell me that I'm dealing with a better quality lead source. We know that I had 59 numbers marked bad numbers, so 24%. If I wanted to have a discussion with my lead provider, I could now say, listen, I did the numbers, and 25% roughly of the leads that we're generating are bad numbers. So is there anything that we can do to verify any of that information? You know, it's difficult to do that, but you can have a discussion. You can leverage this information to get a better deal from your lead provider, possibly. Most of the time, the agents that they talk to are not armed with this information. And so all the leverage lies with the lead generator, because they know that you're not going to be able to tell them 24% of my leads had a bad number. I mean, 10% of the leads didn't even have a phone number. Most people aren't equipped with that information. And speaking of no number, we know that 26 of those leads didn't have a telephone number. So that equaled 10.61%. And so just, take a look at that. 24% bad number, 10% no telephone number. We're looking at 35% of the leads that we are paying for that we have no chance at doing anything with. That should be a level of concern and something that I'm trying to improve on. If I'm comparing another lead provider, I'm going to see what the numbers are for that lead provider, right? If they're more favorable with the other lead provider, then I'm going to head in that direction. We know that 15 of the leads were converted into some sort of opportunity. So we had a 6% conversion rate there. That's good. I don't see anything that glares out at me about that. 2 to 3% would probably be the bare minimum standard that we would look to achieve. And really, in my case, I'm looking to get closer to 10% conversion. So 10% of total leads I would like to see converted into an opportunity. And then we have the number of leads that we talked to that were not interested, which was 35. So our lost rate is, a little over 14%. 14% of the leads that we did make contact with told us that they weren't interested. And if I did have 2 appointments, I'm looking at just about a 1%, a little below a 1% conversion rate to appointment. Again, even that would not be crazy. There'd be room for improvement there. But 1 to 2% appointments, total leads closing to appointments, it's a good place to start. And then number of clients won. So if I got 1 client, then, I got 0.41% of my leads are turning into a client, right? And so with that, I could say, man, I want 5 clients. And so then you could reverse engineer. If I know 0.41% of the total leads I generate equals a client and I want 5 clients, then we can do, I think 5 times, 0.41. That may not be the right math, but I'm one of those that has to do it a few times on a calculator. That's why I create these things. But you get my point there, hopefully. And then, by the way, up here, when you're using this, you'd type in your lead source, you'd put your date time frame there, and then the ad spend. And so let's say that over the period that we measured, that this client had spent $600 in ad spend. So with that, we can see that, well, we had 245 leads, right? Over the 6, so our cost per lead was 41 cents. Great. But what if the leads are crap, right? 41 cents is too much. My cost to acquire an opportunity, right? We had 15 opportunities, so it was 3 cents to acquire that opportunity in my pipeline. And the cost to acquire a client, why that says 0, I don't know. It would be $600. I don't know why. I'll check that formula. But you get it. We spent $600 to generate all these leads. If we got 1 client out of it, then what was the cost to acquire that client? It was the $600, right? And I don't know if this is right. And so let's just do the math here real quick to make sure that my formulas are right here. So out of the 245, we got 15 opportunities, out of the $600 also. And so it's actually $40. I knew that didn't add up right. I'll change the formula. So it was $40 for us to acquire an opportunity here. F3 divided by B18, F3 divided by B18. Here we go. So $40 to acquire the opportunity. I knew that sounded crazy. And this one's probably wrong too, yeah. $2.45 a lead. Now, sounds a little bit more realistic, right? And then the cost to acquire, this should end up being $600. $600, boom, right? So now let's say that we would have gotten 5 appointments, and we got 3 clients, let's say. So all that changes now. See, our appointment rate went up to 2%. Now we're in the money zone. This is where we want to be. Our close rate converted to client, over 1% of total leads were turning into a client. Now my cost to acquire a client was only $200. My cost to acquire the opportunity is still the same, 40. By the way, some of those will turn into a client soon. Over time, that'll affect these numbers, and the cost of lead stayed the same at $2.45. But this right here, that $2, if I can get that, I'm doing it all day long. Any of you that are paying for Zillow or Realtor.com, and you know what your cost to acquire a customer or your customer acquisition cost is, you know it's a whole hell of a lot more than $200, isn't it? Any of you that know, I'd love to see you drop it in the chat box. If you don't know, now you've got a spreadsheet, and I literally walk through step by step how I get at that information. It's a little bit of a manual process, and maybe your system provides you some reports or something like that where you can get these data points without doing what I did. But you know, it's also, I think, a really good exercise to go through the process that I did for a few reasons. You really internalize the principle, and you really understand how you're getting at the information. In addition, you spend more time in your CRM. And one of the keys to being able to navigate around your system and get at this so that it doesn't consume a whole bunch of time and effort is you need to be comfortable with the CRM. If you haven't logged into your CRM in a month, then going in and getting this information might seem like a daunting task. It's daunting to do anything if you haven't logged in a month, right? So I would say that the more familiar you can get with your system, the easier it's going to be for you to get at all this information and put it to work also. So I'm going to share that. Matter of fact, before I forget, let me share this spreadsheet with everybody who's on the call with us today. And then I'm going to open it up to any questions right now. We're coming up to about probably 10 minutes or so before the end of the call. And so I will open up the lines to any questions anybody has. And here's a link there in the chat box, guys, to get you this lead source audit spreadsheet. I hope that helps. Anybody got any comments? And by the way, if anybody wants to have a one-on-one kind of walkthrough with your lead source in order to kind of determine where it's at, I'd be happy to do that. You can send a chat, and we will have somebody reach out to you and schedule a time to do a lead audit right alongside with you. So you can drop me a chat here in the box. You can send me an email, jeff@kinderreese.com. That's probably the shortest and easiest one to use. And I got one question here from Christine Smith. Is clients one actual closed or appointment set, written commitment to work together? Great question. So it's guaranteed to work with. So it's either that we got the listing paperwork signed, we're taking the listing, or it's if I did get my buyer's advantage paperwork or my buyer's representation agreement signed. That I'm considering a client. Now, on the next level, right, if we wanted to get to what the return per client was, then we could take the clients that actually close, right, and we can sum that total sales number, and then we could reverse it into the $600, $600 or something, and then I could get to what that's getting me return wise. In other words, if these three clients paid me $15,000, well, I got almost a 300% return then on the $600. So that's a different, it's a different kind of calculation, but I hope that makes sense. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it, man. I always see you crushing it. Jolita, I remember seeing you at boot camp, meeting you. So let me share the link again. If you didn't see the link, let me put it in there again. Hopefully you guys can see that. Oh wait, you know what? I was sharing it only with panelists. There you go. Now you should be able to see it. All right, and Christine asked another good question here. So am I auditing per agent to evaluate conversion per agent per source? And I definitely add that. Yeah, exactly. So you get me on the revenue side that we talked about. So I would do it both ways, right? And so I would do a lead source audit so that I can determine whether or not I need to make some changes with my lead provider. And then assuming that those leads that get generated are being distributed to the team, either round robin or based on the area that they work in, whatever it is, right? Then I can show me all the Google leads that are assigned to Mary Smith. And I'm going to do this thing for Mary Smith. And then show me all the Google leads that were assigned to Frank Thomas. And I'm going to do the same thing for Frank Thomas. And I'm going to go, damn, Mary's crushing it. Frank's not. Let me get Mary and Frank together and let's see what she's doing that he's not, right? Or vice versa. Or if I see that Frank's percentage, his lost rate is way higher than Mary's, then there's something that Frank is saying, right, that's getting him people to tell him that they're not interested more than Mary is. And so absolutely, Christine, you're on the right track. I would do it from a 30,000 foot view level just on the lead source itself, and then I would do an audit for everybody on my team. This platform that you saw me walk through here is Market Maker. It's a sister company of ours, and it's a great system. We used it for years in our own brokerage that we had here in Dallas, Fort Worth with Michael Reese and Jay Kinder. We use it now a lot because I have a small ISA team that responds to leads in real time for agents, and a lot of those people use Market Maker here. So it's a cool system. If you're interested in learning more about it, we can definitely have somebody reach out to you on that. But you know, I've also got clients that are using Perfect Storm, Follow Up Boss, Lion Desk, Boomtown, Real Geeks, the back end of that. All of those systems that I've been in have the tools and the access to do everything we did right here today. So getting all the information, the data points that you're going to need to put in this spreadsheet should be available no matter what system you're using. You just need to determine how that information is labeled in your system. In Market Maker, when somebody says they're not interested, the status that you would put them in is lost. In your system, maybe it's something else. So you just need to find the equivalent label, and you ought to be good to go. All right. So great questions, Christine. I appreciate you being on the call and being engaged. It's my favorite thing to have people engaged, asking questions and stuff like that. So great job, Jolita. Everybody else on the call today, thank you for joining us. Don't forget, if you want to get more in-depth in-person training, the next boot camp is coming April 22nd to the 24th. So book your tickets now for that. And other than that, I'm gonna let you guys go and get back at it. So I appreciate everybody. If there's anything that I can do for you, you be sure and reach out to me, jeff@kinderreese.com. If you wanna set up a one-on-one walkthrough in your platform to really hone in on what the lead quality is, I'd be happy to do that too. So again, guys, have a great rest of the week and reach out to me if I can help in any way.